Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 34th Annual Haitian Studies Association Conference. I am so happy to see you here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The 34th Annual Haitian Conference, under the title Maounage, Haitian Studies as a Space for Refuge, Resistance, and Freedom, is being held here in Washington, D.C. This is one of our online events, pre-conference events, and we are happy to have you. I just want to make one quick announcement before I yield the floor to Mr. Alan Yarborough of the Episcopal Church, who will serve as your moderator today. If you have any questions about conference events, I am putting the link to the conference website in the chat. All of the information you need is on the website. Tomorrow we will begin on-site registration at Howard University's campus in Douglas Hall, the first floor. So if you will be joining us in person, registration will be in Douglas Hall on the first floor. At this point, I will pass the baton to Mr. Yarborough.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be with you all today. And again, for the second year in a row, I'm humbled and grateful to lead an advocacy training as a part of the pre-conference activities for the Haitian Studies Association's annual gathering. So today, I'll start us off with a brief summary of how I see advocacy to the U.S. government on foreign policy and the impact that can have. And then we'll hear from Guerline Jozef, and then Congresswoman Cherfilus-McCormick will be joining us around 4. There will be a couple of specific opportunities for questions as we go along, including hopefully with the Congresswoman, assuming that her schedule will permit that. But please make use of the chat and asking questions as we go. In addition, it would be wonderful in the chat. I see a few names that I know, but you all may not know each other. To introduce yourself briefly, just your name, where you're from, your connection to HSA, perhaps, if you have a connection there. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get underway, sharing my screen for just a few slides. We'll not spend too much time with PowerPoint. So virtual advocacy training, using your power to positively influence U.S. foreign policy. So in some ways, it's a narrow topic. It's one that is both specific to the U.S. government. It means not necessarily being involved in complementary processes or means of engagement in our communities that we may be more familiar with or more interested in already. But I hope to illuminate this work in a way to motivate you to be involved in it more, pointing you to resources like the Haiti Advocacy Working Group that I chair. It's a group of about 35 organizations that have ties to Haiti and at least some capacity to engage the U.S. government on foreign policy. But despite that narrow approach, I actually want to begin our time together taking a step back, a step out from what we mean by advocacy, or what I mean by advocacy. And I think about the work of the office that I'm employed by, the Episcopal Church's Office of Government Relations. And to me, that word relations is critical. It's central to this work, because while we are trying to hold the U.S. government accountable, really the essence or the practical way we carry out that work is through relationship building. And so that's where I want to start. And how important relationship building is, how vulnerable it can be, how difficult sometimes with the persistence and the patience that it's required to build the types of relationships necessary to be effective is actually perhaps more overwhelming than it seems. And I think personally that bringing our whole selves into that is important, especially if we expect to meet others where they are, whether they're in a position of power in the U.S. government, or they represent another organization we want to join with, or they're simply an individual we're in solidarity with. Being our whole selves and seeing others as their whole selves is critical. And I think it's an act of vulnerability, strength, and preservation. To me, just an example of this is this photograph of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is not a typical one that people see, or one that is more commonly referenced. It's typically quite a serious, I think, impression that people have of him, and rightly so, for the amazing work he did through the civil rights movement in the United States. But there are also moments like this where he is experiencing and expressing joy. He's being his whole self, playing pool, and you can see the expressions of the people behind him. And so maybe it seems off to begin a conversation about advocacy on topics that are so serious in a moment where things in Haiti are so dire, to talk about joy. But I think it's important to do so because of this element of bringing our whole selves into a relationship. So to get to a bit more detail on what I mean by these three things, how is it vulnerable? We are imperfect. We don't know everything that there is to know. We may lack knowledge. We're going to make mistakes, as will others. And then we also have our own contexts. We have our identities, sometimes our privileges, our lived experience. We have trauma. And so bringing our whole self into a relationship is hard. It means opening ourselves up in a way that may invite some risk, that may provoke some fear. And so how do we live with that? How do we make sure we're acknowledging that? But then bringing our whole selves, I think, is also an act of strength. I think this vulnerability and strength goes together because it takes conviction, it takes humility, and I think perhaps most importantly, curiosity, to be ourselves with others who are being their selves. And third, I think it's an act of preservation. Because I think if we're, being true to who we were made to be, and then extending that to others in our community, it's sometimes just necessary. It's saying we are here. It's saying we're visible. And of course, that looks different for different communities based on a number of variables, from identities, national origin, skin color, the language. There are all sorts of variables mixed in. But I think at the root of this relationship building is vulnerability, strength, and preservation. So that's a pretty wide lens from which I'm approaching government advocacy. And I want to share a couple more points before we continue to get more detailed. And it's the politics, the act of making decisions together as a community. It requires relationship. And one of the amazing things I think with the Haitian Studies Association, and I imagine many of you on this call, are based in the US. Not everyone, but many are based in the US. And there's a particular power, right or wrong, that people in the US have in the representation that they have in our government to then influence foreign policy abroad. And that influence carries weight because policy issues impact real people. Our office, the office I work for the Episcopal Church, covers dozens and dozens of topics, and I'll give a glimpse at that in a moment for a reason. And sometimes those topics feel less personal to me. Maybe I have not had a lived experience with one of them. Maybe it doesn't impact my identity as closely, but I think those of us who are here probably have a particular affinity, association, connection to Haiti in some way, whether we're Haitian, Haitian American, we've lived there before, whatever that may be. And we recognize that foreign policy to Haiti impacts people. It impacts us. And I think it's critical in that work to distinguish between what we want and how we're actually going to get there. And sometimes we can experience disagreement. Sometimes we can even be turned away from working together with others if we're not careful in that distinction. Because I think we can seek an agreement on what, perhaps more likely or more easily than we can seek an agreement on how. In particular, because the how may involve compromise. And so it's important to understand the power of and the limits to compromise. If we are seeking, a particular perspective from the US government, a particular approach, but we're not going to get 100% of what we want, are we going to settle for 50%, whatever that may look like? So this is hopefully bringing in in a cone shape, relationship building, connecting why that's important, how this connects to policy, because policy impacts real people, and then actually carrying that policy out or advocacy out and expressing what we want and recognizing how we get there may be different and may require different language is important. And I think it's important as well to distinguish, between the how versus what, because we're called to be effective. If we're engaging in advocacy, it's not merely standing on the right side of justice. That's important. We've got to do that. That's got to be something we keep in mind. But then how are we actually realizing that in a non-neutral world? How are we realizing what we want to see? And that's got to require some deeper thinking. It's got to require some strategy, some patience, fine-tuning our thinking on what steps we take as we move into relationship building with government officials. And so in terms of I've been a bit nebulous here so far in terms of advocacy and what that may mean. But essentially, thinking of it as relationship building, it is saying on a number of issues what we want the U.S. government to do, or any particular entity, any particular target of our advocacy. What do we want them to do? Making sure they hear that message, we're communicating it clearly. But I think it is also asking, how can we be useful? What expertise are we bringing into these conversations? What connections do we have that we can bring into these conversations that are relevant to the policymakers that we're trying to influence? And that changes the posture of it. Going back to the vulnerability piece, it shows that we are being vulnerable, but yet also offering ourselves up. And that's going to make for a stronger conversation. And so in thinking about how do we then develop a strategy of advocacy, of actually contacting elected officials or contacting the U.S. State Department or other entities of the U.S. government, there are any number of topics that we can look at. In our office, the Office of Government Relations, just as an example, these are sort of the policy buckets or areas that we focus on: creation, care, or matters of the environment, ending poverty, racial reconciliation, migration, refugees, and immigration, and human rights and peace building. An enormous body of work. There are organizations that focus on any one of these. And even still, they're quite broad. So you can get more granular than that, right? And look at healthcare. You can look at criminal justice, HIV/AIDS, even more specific in a healthcare component, human rights of particular populations, including LGBTI or LGBTQ populations, and looking at gun violence, looking at trafficking in persons or trafficking in arms, or protections of children and education. There are all sorts of policy areas where we can be engaging, where you all may be engaging in your respective places in tangible ways, and sorting through this, because there's so many different elements. I think almost everything on the screen, applies to the Haiti context. There's so many different elements here of where work is ongoing and needs to be done. So where do we sort through it? How do we lean into our capacities for engagement, our expertise, our particular angle? Another thing to complicate matters is actually what the government environment is like in the U.S. government. It is not a monolith, the U.S. government, and there are a lot of individuals engaging in it that each have their own perspectives, each have their own particularities, their own levers that they can pull, changes that they can make, and they have limitations on that. And so the State Department is its own, operations. You have the Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Congress is its whole entity, and then of course the presidential administration, and others, each of which, represent different places where we can engage in relationship building with those policymakers. And even just thinking about the U.S. Congress. So for those who aren't familiar, a congressional session in the U.S. is 2 years. We are coming to the end of the 117th session of the U.S. Congress. So this particular slide is referring to the 2 years prior to this one. And in those 2 years, Congress introduced over 16,000 pieces of legislation across all sorts of different topics. So it's an enormous volume of information to sort through. Beyond that, though, only 1,800 were actually voted on. And then even fewer, about 300, were actually enacted into law. Of course, all of these don't pertain to Haiti or have any necessarily have an impact on Haiti even remotely. But I'm sharing this to show how complex the U.S. government can be and how difficult engaging with it can be. So, excuse the sirens. So not only do we have a lot of different policy areas or issue areas to sort through where we may feel called to speak, but then who our advocacy targets are quite diverse. There are a lot of them, and knowing who can do what can be difficult to determine sometimes. Knowing who is responsible for what particular policy, whether they're aware of it or not, can be difficult in this environment. And so moving into a bit of a strategy and some tangible action steps before I wrap up my section here, we look at our advocacy tools as the ones that I'll be showing on the screen. And some of them are quite public, sort of above the surface. So that's why we have this image of an iceberg here that people may be more familiar with. But then there's a lot of work. In fact, I think the greatest volume of our time in doing advocacy is spent below the surface, more privately. But the above the surface stuff are things like calls to action, write your members of Congress, write the president, speak out for a particular issue related to Haiti and deliver that to a particular person. Holding press conferences can be a means of delivering that information as well, and managing media relations. Public statements and sign-on letters you all may be familiar with. I know I've worked with a few of you on here with some of those. And how do we build a coalition of organizations speaking out on the same thing? There's also, and this will tie to an example below the surface, there's a letter coming out this afternoon. In fact, I think it was supposed to be released at 3 from the House and the Senate to the Biden administration about the governance situation in Haiti that I was fortunate to help craft some of the language around. That's a sign-on letter among members of Congress. So they're doing the same dynamic to put pressure on the Biden administration to change the direction of U.S. foreign policy. But I think in all of this, it's also important to keep ourselves informed, to make sure that we and others are educated. And to me, that's why social media and email campaigns are included, educational resources, newspaper op-eds, using our voice to speak out more generally versus specific to a particular member of Congress is also a piece of this. So below the surface, you have actions like building relationships with policymakers and informing them. That's where, to me, advocacy comes in as a two-way street. It's saying, I've worked in healthcare in Haiti for X number of years. I'm familiar with it. How can that information be helpful to the CDC and the programs that they're developing to help implement through the U.S. Embassy in Haiti? Developing strategies with other organizations. That's a lot of what the Haiti Advocacy Working Group tries to do. We can be imperfect at it at times, but that's ultimately our goal, is how do we coordinate messaging so that we can be stronger together. Sometimes it's very quiet and off the record outreach. Not everything has to be a protest or a march. That is excellent and complementary work to all of this, but it is different. And so sometimes there's a time for saying, hey, let me nudge you. Can I nudge this member of Congress to make a particular message? And that can be helpful. And then looking at grassroots versus grass tops. Are there community leaders we can reach out to, or do we need a volume of people? Both of those activities require their own particular types of work. Finally, as I mentioned, the complex environment of the U.S. government, tracking legislation is a huge task in and of itself. I think there was another bill just introduced this afternoon, or is going to be introduced this week, rather, around some reporting on criminal activity in Haiti, in particular with international connections. So tracking legislation and seeing what's needed to get it passed is something that we all can be involved in here in the U.S. and even be involved in crafting the drafts or the language of those bills. Opportunities for which come as a result of relationship building. So if we can build trust, we're bringing in this vulnerability, we're being our whole selves, we're sharing the gifts that we have in this relationship building, that's going to lead over time to more and more opportunities to have influence. So I hope, recognizing our time is quite short today, I hope that this overview of kind of advocacy tools, emphasizing the relational element of advocacy is helpful for you. And I want to close with a couple of points around how to then sort through these tools and sort through the overwhelming number of issues that we need to speak out on, even related just to the context of U.S. foreign policy to Haiti. And so, in considering each of these tools, they each require a different amount of work and have a different reward. Many of those below the surface take a lot of time. They take persistence. We may not clearly know, when we've achieved it. For example, creating a sign-on letter. Okay, we have a final draft. We can collect names and signatures, and then we can release it. That's a bit more predictable. It has its own challenges, but it's a bit more predictable. Versus informing and building relationships, that's trickier. It's nebulous. We may have to shift from, and make different contacts in different places. And so as we're thinking about the time that we're putting into these resources and the reward that they bring, I think these particular questions are helpful. What is you or your organization's unique value add? Great, we understand Haiti, you have an understanding of the context. That in and of itself is unique and valuable. Can you get even more specific than that? Are you sticking with the example of healthcare? Are you connected with healthcare? Or perhaps you're connected with K through 12 education. That's an even more specific specialty and knowledge that can be useful for US policymakers. And then where you have that greater value add, go after those labor intensive tools that have a higher reward. And the inverse of that, for everything else, use tools that require less time. So maybe you feel called to speak out on immigration for Haitian migrants in various capacities because it's an important issue. It's one we need more voices on, but that's not an area of expertise you have. Do something quick like add your name to a sign-on letter, write your members of Congress, but don't overlook seeking out who is connected at the U.S. Embassy that is working on matters of education policy in Haiti or of healthcare, and really spend your time building relationships with those people and trying to bring your value add into that space. That's the gist of what I wanted to share today. I hope that it is helpful and helps you think about government relations in a bit differently. And just want to remind you all again for questions, if you have them, to place them in the chat. But I hope that my very brief and rough reference to immigration is a great lead-in to our first guest speaker today, Guerline Jozef, who has done a lot of this work in so many different respects, from the organizing and public elements of this that I really did not cover as much in detail, to really understanding and knowing the behind-the-scenes work that's required sometimes for advocacy. So I'm really very humbled and grateful once again to pass this off to her as we move the program forward. So Guerline, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Alan. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. As we always say, honneur respect for those who have joined and who are listening. Thank you so much again. As Alan mentioned, for those who do not know me, my name is Guerline Jozef. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Youth Alliance, co-founder of the Black Immigrants Bell Fund and the Cameroon Advocacy Network, proud member and supporter of Haitian Studies Association. And I see Claudine, I see Nicole, Amanda, I see Melinda, Mark, so I see the family is here. So I am grateful to each and every one of you. I kind of piggyback on what Alan was sharing, the importance of advocacy, organizing. I think for us, the way we are able to center our advocacy work that in turns push for policy change is directly tied based on the fact that we work directly with the community. We are first responders, we are humanitarian, providing humanitarian assistance. We are humanitarian. We are on the ground with the people, dealing with communities, whether it is at the US-Mexico border, in the immigration prison system, in the country, partnership with what's happening on the ground in Haiti, working directly and looking for direction from civil societies and anyone who is willing to really make changes that are necessary in order for us to move forward. And as Alan mentioned, we many times have to understand the different ways to engage partners. Sometimes we take the streets from the border to DC. We just have a 1 week of action in honor of what we all witnessed last year, in September of last year, where 15,000 plus Black migrants came to Acuña, that is on the Mexico side, were able to go through the river and get to the Del Rio side under the bridge. And we all witnessed how they were received, the mistreatment, which and the abuse that was put upon little Black boys and little Black girls with their parents carrying nothing but food to try to feed them. We all saw that picture. And if you're able to zoom into that picture, you will see the CBP officer holding the person. You will see him holding Muard, who is one of our clients and plaintiff. You will see the horse about to trample him. You will see the whip. But unfortunately, the report that came out from the government is that what we saw did not happen. What we witnessed did not happen. So as a part of that, what we did do multiple approach to answer to what we all witnessed. So I'm using that as a case, right, as to how we're able to not only respond as first responders, being on the ground, under the bridge with the people. And I had Nicole with me under the bridge in Del Rio, dealing with that, providing support, providing legal advice, but at the same time, trying to understand the needs of the people and interview the people. So what we were able to do was not only being there to provide direct assistance, but also look into human rights abuse that was a part of what we all witnessed. So we did a lawsuit on behalf of the community, on behalf of the 14,000+ people, but we have 11 specific claims of the lawsuit. In addition to that, we had letters, right? So that was one tactic to hold people accountable. And then we had letters that we led in collaboration with many people who are on the call, many coalition partners, both within the immigration rights, the racial justice movement, the civil rights justice movement, to really center the lives of migrants as whole people. So in addition to the lawsuit, we had letters that were sent directly to President Biden, Secretary Mayorkas at DHS, really centering the needs of what needs to happen. At the same time, we engage Congress, right? We have congressional members who are engaging with us to center the reality and the lives of the impacted community members. So I just mentioned 3 different things: humanitarian assistance, direct action to litigation, letter writing that includes all partners and people who can sign up, and at the same time engaging Congress to find solution. In addition to that, we also engage with the administration because we understand that we will take to the streets from Tijuana at the border to in front of the White House, but at the same time, there are some things, some results that we need to have. We need to have those through engagement and behind closed door meetings that are not public, right? But we are able to engage to find concrete solutions right here, right there. One of those win that we were able to achieve, and I say a win because we had to fight to receive TPS for Haiti. And when we talked about redesignation of TPS for Haiti, people say we just want them to extend it. But because we are at the border and we had received over 100,000 Haitians, since 2015, we clearly understood that extension for TPS was going to only be for people who had TPS since 2010, which means anyone who arrived after that date will not qualify, will not be eligible to receive TPS. So that's why we fought very hard with a lot of our community members, coalition members, to change the narrative from extension to redesignation of TPS. And after a very, very long fight, and Nicole can attest to that, we were able, again, with partnership with coalitions, win TPS for Haiti. And instead of having the 50,000, 60,000 people who were eligible, we now have 150,000 Haitians eligible for TPS. And for that, we had marches from Florida to DC to New York, but we had literally bi-weekly meetings with the administration, the different department within DHS, from ICE to literally every department within the administration, to find ways to make our case as to why redesignation is a key to getting what we needed. Same thing for TPS for Cameroon. As we work with the Haitian community, and what we said is that we went to the border for the Haitians, but we stayed for everyone. Haitian Bridge Alliance is the only Black-led organization, only Haitian women-led organization that is working at the US-Mexico border to answer the need of all people of African descent. That include Afro-Latinx people, Garifuna communities from Honduras to Guatemala to Colombia, to people coming from the homeland in Africa, anywhere from Cameroon to Togo to Ethiopia, Eritrea, LGBTQAI members from Caribbean countries such as Jamaica, and definitely people fleeing Haiti, whether it is after the earthquake or currently due to extreme political turmoil, gang violence, etc. So we continue to center the lives of impacted community members and support their leadership to be able to gain, to be able to win, to be able to have positive outcome. So when we are looking into the work that we do, we use every tool in our Jakut, right? We use every tool that we can find, from direct action to closed doors meetings to engagement with Congress members from both sides of the aisle. We are a non-partisan organization. We center the lives of people, and we have been able to see success. We have been able to see wins, again, in collaboration with partners across the country. You know, I can name some organization name. I don't want to do that because others will say we did not name them, but they all know who they are. And so as I'm looking into the Haitian Studies Association, how do people can participate? How do people can join in the fight against white supremacy, anti-Black racism, when it comes to immigration? But at the same time, way past immigration, when we look into the criminal justice movement, right? And we look into places like Miami, when honestly, a lot of young people who find themselves involved in criminal justice system and end up in prison in places like Miami are young Haitian men. How do we address those issues locally with local elected officials, but at the same time bring that to the federal level to make sure we find the proper solutions for these things? We continue to look more into how do we create sustainable conditions on the ground in Haiti. And when we are looking at Haiti specific, right, we have to be able to engage with different levels of not only government, civil society, and impacted communities. How are we going to enter to the current crisis in Haiti if the school continues to be closed? If we don't have hospitals for people to go to? If all the roads are not in conditions for people to be able to travel, right? And when we continue to see the agriculture completely destroyed, whether by the Clintons with the rice or previous administration with destroying the poultry industry, the cochon haïtien industry. Now we're looking at peanut industries, right? How do we make sure, in order for Haiti to move from this abyss that we have created, and I say we have created both what I call internal displacement, internal violence, that is included people who are on the ground in the country, government leadership and what's not, but at the same time, external violence by the United States, the core group, the Canada, the French, and the whole world complicit in what's happening. So we engage in all of those different ways to be able to find positive solutions in order for us to move forward. So it's not just one thing, it's a multi-pronged approach. We have our legal avenues where we are going to hold you accountable to lawsuits, and we are going to win, right? And then how do we work with Congress to make sure that we hold them accountable as well, so that they can create the proper laws to change the current immigration system as it is? That lies upon Congress, right? But when we are fighting for TPS, we know that we need to engage directly with DHS and the various entities, including the Secretary of DHS, to get the results that we need. But when it comes for DED for Liberia, we have to work directly with the Office of the President, because the Office of the President himself, is the one who can provide DED. But for TPS, it's the secretary, right? We have to know who the people who are in charge of each department, who are the people who can make certain decisions, and each engagement for those specific entities can, should, and will be different. I know I have said a lot. I know that Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick will be joining. I can stop briefly if you have questions. I like to engage, right, instead of me talking, but engage. What questions do you have? How have you been engaging in this work, whether it is academic, whether it is organizing, advocacy? How are you engaging in this work? Again, from rally, marching, rally, peaceful protest, to direct action, engagement with different departments and within the administration, writing letters, legal action. How are you engaging in the fight for justice? If nobody answers, I will call on people. And it could be as simple as I am interpreting for people when they go to court, right? Or it could be I'm willing to come out to a rally. It could be I'm willing to sign on a letter, or I have signed on letters. It could be I have been at the US-Mexico border. I have witnessed X, Y, and Z. How are you involved? It could be I just came from Haiti and I have witnessed the atrocities on the ground. And how do we engage with that? I see, I'm going to call on names. I'm trying to look at the names. Maggie Carter, if you are willing to share, and it could be, I haven't done anything yet, but I'm committed to take action or to participate. Maybe I can get Nicole Phillips to maybe share or be an example. Sorry, you're going to be the guinea pig.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. These have been great presentations. And so Guerline, you can choreograph my response since you know my activity so much. What exactly would you like me to talk about?
Maybe just share different ways you have been involved in this movement. I can say both in Haiti and at the border, the US, human rights, ways, just so people can understand. You don't have to be one thing or the other. You can participate in different ways.
Well, I think one thing I can share is sort of how I came to HBA, which is, I had been having nightmares about the way, when I was living in Haiti, I was having nightmares about the ways in which this Trump administration was treating immigrants and putting kids in cages and separating families and all this. And I wanted to get involved. I was living in Haiti and I knew I would be moving back to the United States. This was in 2018. And I wanted to get involved in this immigration movement, but I don't speak Spanish and I don't know immigration. I'm not an immigration attorney. And so I thought, that's not my fight. That's not my battle. My battle is, I know Haitian politics, I know elections, I know human rights in Haiti. And so I was speaking to Guerline once and she said, please work for my organization. And I said, I don't know Spanish and I don't know immigration. And she said, no, we need you. We need you because you speak Creole. We need you because you understand Haiti context. And we need you because you're a human rights lawyer, and what the violations that are happening in our immigration system are human rights violations. And we need you to call that out and to help lead advocacy campaigns for policy change in the United States on that issue. and also link, because all the work, that Alan's been talking about in his for advocacy for Haiti, what the U.S. government can and should and shouldn't or shouldn't be doing in the U.S. All of that impacts the root causes of why people are leaving Haiti, and so it's all related. It's all one big movement, and I really hadn't seen that. And so Guerline helped me see how all of us. And so I think every single Carla, hello Carla and Ron, lovely to see you, and Claudine, I've been a fan. I don't think we've met in person, but I've been a fan, of course, of your work for decades. And so, all of us have skills and networks and information that are absolutely invaluable to the immigration movement. And then for those of us in the immigration movement, we need to be talking about the root causes in Haiti. If we only focused on deportation, if we're only focused on TPS and those kinds of things, when we're saying stop deportations to Haiti, well, why? We have to understand what is it that people are facing when they get back to Haiti, and understand why it is so difficult for folks to exist when they live back in Haiti, and what the discrimination is and the barriers they're seeing, but then also why are they leaving? And so those movements need to be connected. And that's why I love the Haitian Bridge Alliance so much, because we do work on both sides of it. But I think all of us as a community work on both sides, right? And so just to not see these things in silos and see it as all interrelated, and we should all be supporting each other's work, across the board.
Thank you, Nicole. I see Amanda on the call. Amanda, I know that we connected back in 2018, actually, at Haitian Studies Association, the last in person, I believe, in Haiti. Amanda, after Alan Alliance, is it Jozef Alliance? I see your hands. After Jozef Alliance answers, Amanda, can you share, from the time we connected in Haiti to you coming to the border and what's not, what have you witnessed? But after Mr. Jozef Alliance.
Thank you for sharing that with me. My past experience was on social justice issue in Haiti, was basically helping farmers that were affected by the Caracol Park, and the Office of Haiti engage in mediation with the Inter-American Development Bank and the Haitian government by launching a complaint. That was the first time that a multilateral institution like the IDB, actually accepted that they have done harm to the communities and accept to their grievances or to do some reparations. So, but this isn't kind of isolated. It's important, but I feel like that kind of issue, that kind of case should be used to kind of flag the bigger issue of how US policies affect vulnerable people in Haiti. So that's kind of my experience. And now, since I'm more in the United States, I'm just looking for more I can engage and support the advocacy that is going on so many different issues. And those things have become more critical 6-10 years later. So that's my short experience in that. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Alliance, for sharing that. And we are looking forward to collaborating with you and inviting you to join as we continue, to find different ways to connect and get resolved, as Alan mentioned, whether it is on the ground, but through litigation or through the work that you have done, connecting with us. And Nicole is the right person to connect with, so that we can get those things moving. Appreciate your sharing. Amanda, if you are still there, maybe you can share your experience. And after that, we can have Claudine, share a little bit about how we are connecting and moving forward to find solutions.
Right. Thanks, Guerline. I'm glad to be here. So I've been working with Haitian migrants since 2015, and I've been following, tracking this migratory movement from Haiti to Brazil, and then from Brazil crossing those 11 countries all the way to Mexico. I was until 3 days ago in Tijuana, right in the Mexico-US border, and I was in the Rio last year. I think we didn't see each other for a lapse of a day. So my work has been on anti-Black migration policies and how they affect specifically Haitian migrants, and why Tijuana, that's a presentation I'll give on Saturday, this first Haitian diasporic community at the border in the Mexico side is the result of anti-Black policies, especially TPS, right? Not only in the US, but also Brazilian policies and Mexican policies, right? So it's interesting that you ask that, because my work as an engaged scholar goes from a kind of like on the ground, helping Haitians migrants as I can as a person, and sometimes it's maybe less than as a researcher or as a scholar, right? So I think I'm going to take the opportunity to maybe get back to you, and maybe Nicole can also jump in, and Claudine, who is here. It's a question that I have that follows me every day, is how can we emerging scholars or scholars at every level have a greater impact, right? So I keep asking myself, what's going to be the impact of my dissertation after 7 years following Haitian migrants and being on the ground in Del Rio, in Tijuana, or in Haiti, or in Brazil, or crossing the Darien Canal with them. I hear all the stories. I have, a lot of accounts on their experience and how these policies are, in fact, anti-Black. But I still struggle to understand, how can I really have an impact with my work as a scholar, right? And as I engage with other emerging scholars, and I think we are in the right place for that. My question is, how can we do more as scholars? And I'll be interested, hear from you, who is on the ground, and I think, can tell us more. Tell us what we can do. I think it's important for us to hear from you and other people on the ground.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And I'll also pass it to Alan to help with the Q&A as we await, hopefully, Congresswoman McCormick will join soon. Would like to continue the engagement. Anyone who's willing to share, I see Cristal Filima, if you were able to unmute yourself and maybe share. Could be a couple of words, and then we can go to Carla and Mark and Lucien, whomever is willing to just share. But Alan, if you can support with Q&A, that will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And Amanda, I appreciate that. What is the next step? And to me, why I put things like relationship building below the surface is because it can take some time to position ourselves where we can be effective and where we're talking to the right people, where, especially I think for scholars and in an academic space, it's often a very narrow lens that can be connected to larger issues, but often a very narrow lens. So who can that information be most valuable to? And how do we make sure we access them? And so I think, ideally, and again, we've, as chair of the HOG, have a ways to go in improving how we can facilitate that. But things like the Haiti Advocacy Working Group, or the Haiti Response Coalition, or the Haitian Bridge Alliance, in different ways are making those connections, and can be networks that maybe it's not 100% all the time, but they may have that connection that says, okay, this is what you've studied. This could be helpful for, Guerline, you did a great job, I think, of mentioning not just whole agencies within the US government, and there are a bunch of them, but then their sub, offices underneath that. How do we make sure we get that to the right place? And that can really shape policy and legislation in a productive way. So trying to tap in, I think, to those networks can be helpful, and really recognizing, I think, in particular, the power that many of us can have if we're, again, making an assumption that many on this particular program are based in the US. That's something that we have that many Haitians aren't going to have access to, or may not have a knowledge of. And frankly, I don't think I I wouldn't have an expectation that they should have a knowledge of that. It's simply sort of a result of the power that the U.S. government has and influence they have over foreign policy to Haiti.
I see.
Yeah, go ahead.
I see Professor Pierre.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm thinking about my students here at Howard University, and they are always eager to help. But I think that in general, people who want to help need to understand, they need clarification. So as this is being recorded for posterity, I wonder if you all would help distinguish DACA from TPS and why it affects different non-English speaking migrant groups. And my other question is, how can English native speakers partner with Creole speakers in order to help these migrants that you've been talking about for the past hour? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Pierre, and thank you for your work and providing support specifically with language access. And language access is one of the main issues we continue to deal with. So if you speak Haitian Creole and or Spanish and English, please reach out to us, info@haitianbridge.org, info@haitianbridge.org. If you speak a tiny word of Haitian Creole, some Spanish, some English, we are looking to partner and work with you. And how students can be involved. It's very critical to have the next generation involved in social justice, involved in human rights, involved in creating a better world that we have founded. So we are looking forward to partner with Howard to work not only at the US-Mexico border, but also here in DC to be able to advance the cause, working with Congress, working with the administration, whether it is direct action or behind closed doors meetings, and how do we engage and activate communities and partners. In addition to language access, Professor Pierre, we are looking for attorneys. We are looking for people to come and join as fellows. We are looking, we just came back from Geneva, where for the first time in 6 years, the United States was being reviewed by the international community. And for the first time, we led a delegation to address immigration in the United States and hold the United States accountable in Geneva, or in the international platform. And the first time, Black immigrants was at the center of that conversation. And Haitian Bridge Alliance, we felt blessed and privileged to lead, the fight to lead people into that direction. But it's a lot of work. We need researchers. We need people in academia, and we need people everywhere. And one thing that my dad taught me, and I always mention my parents because I do this work, even though I ran away from this field, but I found myself here because that's how they raised me. And that's how they guided me, was to be able to do this work. What he told me is that, I remember I was about 7 years old, and he was taking me to meet some very high folks within different government, including presidents and vice presidents and what's not. And what he told me before we entered, he stopped me and said, he said, we are going to meet those presidents, but remember, the janitor is the one who's going to open the door. And that stayed with me until today. So it doesn't matter when we are advocating and engaging, it doesn't matter if we are going to address the president or the custodials, we have to make sure that they each have a place in the movement. And at the end of the day, the custodials might be the ones getting you in the door. I see the Congresswoman is here. Alan, I will pass it to you to welcome our fierce leader who is leading the fight, the plight in Congress, not only for the Haitian community, but representing her constituents. But Alan, if I do the introduction, she might not have the time to talk herself because I will just talk about her. I'll give it back to you, Alan, to introduce our amazing leader that I have had the blessing to call a sister and a friend.
Wonderful, Guerline. Thank you for your comments and that introduction. I don't have much to add other than just welcome and thank you for your time, Congresswoman Cherfilus-McCormick. I appreciate it, and I'll spotlight your video in just a moment. But we'll turn the floor over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you so much, Alan, for having me. A big thank you to Guerline, Jozef, who many of the times she's always understated, and I don't think the whole world understand how imperative her work is, her leadership. And I always say that this is definitely a team sport, and she is definitely one of the lead team members. We just had our hearings and she was excellent. And we had some issues with the translator, and immediately we're like, Guerline, jump in there. And she jumped in, she translated. Her breadth of knowledge about the issues, her presence at the events when they're going on. And when we need a trusted person who we trust what they're saying and what they've been able to see, it's always her. But I thank you so much for having me. I don't know if you wanted me to go on with the presentation or if you want to do the video. I go where they send me to go, and I was happy to be here.
Yes, I'm happy to just provide some brief context, over the conversation we've had so far. Really just an introduction to what advocacy can be and how particularly people in the US can be a resource to policymakers in DC, whether that's federal agencies, the White House, or like in your case, congressional offices. So I think it could be useful and would be wonderful if you could share how we could be helpful. How can we support your work and engage with your office, especially in regards to foreign policy to Haiti?
Definitely. Well, I'll give you a little bit about my background. I actually started off into politics and advocacy. So my background, I went to Howard University and I studied political science. Always wanted to be a judge, but my life got derailed when I started raising my daughter by myself. But I eventually went to school to get my master's in business administration, then went to St. Thomas Law School, and I was actually in the healthcare space. I got into the healthcare space around the time of the Affordable Health Care Act, around 2010. And, I was raised to always make sure that I can really understand my craft and really just perfect my craft. And so at that time, I realized if I was going to be successful when it came to healthcare, I really had to understand the law because we got reimbursed from the law. And as I started becoming successful in healthcare, I started seeing, firsthand how it was us who were dying because we didn't get the medication we needed, or we couldn't afford to get the medication, or we didn't have coverage. And when I say us, it's our community, not just the Haitian community, but anyone who's from a low income family. And after you watch death after death after death, and when it impacts your own home, when you realize that there are life-saving treatments that are classified as experimental, but because you don't have the access to it financially, the background, even the savings, they look at your savings to see if you can come into these programs, you're denied that medication, and you can't survive. I'll give you an example for it when it became real for me. At one point, my dad, he was diagnosed with cancer. He was a doctor, and he immediately said, I need to get into an experimental treatment plan. He took that, he had multiple myeloma, and he's still alive today, where there's been many people who have been denied getting into that program because it's experimental and it's not funded, but we know it works. And so I felt like that was an injustice, and I started advocating for access to healthcare. As I was advocating for access to healthcare, I started wrestling, finding resources for my daughter who had a learning disability, not really even understanding the developmental issues that were there. And with the Haitian background, my parents were like, oh, there's nothing wrong with her. She needs to study harder. but it was the medical help, the mental help, a lot of the developmental issues that I didn't know because I didn't have access to that level of healthcare. Even as an attorney, I didn't have access to it. So I started fighting for her. I said, if I could fight for everyone else, I could fight for our children. And that's how I got into it. And so I always say that the best way to get into advocacy and the place where you'll be the most effective is a place where your heart hurts the most. Watching my daughter go through that, watching my father go through it, watching people get denied, it just made me so passionate about it. And I said that this has to end, and it could be my duty to make it end. I never wanted another parent to suffer, another child, and it became real for me. And that's where I became a really convincing voice, because I understood the issue, not just the intellectual part, but I felt it. And that takes me directly into the Haiti part of it, because a lot of people would advocate on Haiti and they have a position on Haiti. And a lot of the times the position on Haiti might be an intellectual or a cerebral position on Haiti. But when you are Haitian American, when you've gone to Haiti, when you have that in your roots and it's flowing through your blood, it's a different type of fight. We understand that this fight is not just about human rights violations, success of Haiti, but it's also about our legacy, our personality, our pride, and who we are and how we make these moments great, especially not just in the United States, but also for our partners internationally. And so if you want to be the best advocate you can, think about everything that upsets you or everything you're passionate about, and then make sure you have all the information so you can add to the conversation. My office always takes in interns. We always have even programs where we have fellows who are more active and they're actually writing. We always have a good amount of people coming in, because one of the blessings about being in school is that you're actually learning a lot of the issues immediately. The think tanks, you have access to that. And another thing that why we ground ourselves in that also is because thought it changes, right? We're not a stagnant culture. We are not stagnant people, and our society isn't stagnant. And so it's important that we have the input of everyone, especially our future leaders. And that takes me to the most important point about advocacy and your role in advocacy. Our future is depending on your role in advocacy, developing that right here and right now. It takes years to have the legal background to really understand what is admissible, what can happen, and what can't happen. The beauty about, and I always support law. I always say, go for it, just because that's my background, right? But the beauty about law is that you become a creator and an innovator of policies that get to fit the moment and the time. And that's what really transcends us as a country. It transcends us as Haitian Americans. It transcends us as a community, and just being from wherever you are. And so that's why it's so imperative that we're able to elevate you now. We're able to expose you. I always tell this story that when I first decided that I was going to run, a part of me, after being a healthcare executive, running a company that was doing extremely well, being one of the youngest CEOs, and having degrees, I still felt like I couldn't do it. I wasn't good enough to do it. And I feel like it's because I wasn't exposed to it. And then once I started actually going on the Hill, lobbying, having conversations, I realized that there was no difference between me and the member sitting across from me intellectually. There was no difference from that person and me, except for they actually ran a campaign and won. And I realized that if we can get disciplined enough to run and put the best foot forward, we can win, because it's not an intellectual thing. It's not a capacity thing. It's really about being called and going. And so I took that leap of faith. And so I tell everybody who's in the position right now where you want to be an advocate and you're feeling like, I don't know enough, that's absolutely not true. If you're feeling like it's not for you or it's other people, the best advocates are the people who have experienced it, the people who have suffered it and survived. And the fact that you're actually on this call lets me know that you suffered it and you survived it. And if you're on this call, that means you're called to it. So I would suggest that everyone who is looking for that space, who is looking for a lane to articulate your voice, go for it, because what's missing is our voice, our story, our perspective. And that's what I bring as the first Haitian elected Democrat to Congress. But just like I bring that, you bring your own story, your own view and your own struggles. And that's what we need. We need more people highlighting that. When it comes specifically to foreign affairs, we find that being a part of the diaspora, if you're connected to whatever country it is, that is a unique place because you have a duality of an experience. You have understanding that other people may not have understanding. And I'll give you an example of that. If you're Haitian American and you grew up in my time, you know what a tonton macoute is. You understand what were the leftover scars of a dictatorship. You understand some of the mentalities of what was going on. So when we talk about even what's going on today and we see some things rising up that look similar, it's because we understand what that looked like and what was the goal of it. But there are people who never lived it and never understood Haitian mindset or why these things even come up. And so that's what makes us important. But it's not just limited to Haitian, because we find a lot of Haitian people or people who have part of the Haitian diaspora who lived in Canada, who lived around the country, who have that duality of a perspective. And that's really what's needed when it comes to having the understanding on how and what to advocate on. But then there's wisdom that comes, and that wisdom really comes on leaning on your mentors, leaning on people in the space, but also leaning on the people who went before you. Leaning on the people who went before you, they can actually help you gauge on where to be, how to do it, not necessarily what to say, but just how to effectuate, to have most of that. So that's definitely the things that I would put forward. And there's definitely a huge space for advocates when it comes to the Haitian diaspora, because we are really the breakthrough generation. And I say the breakthrough generation because for the first time, we broke into Congress. For the first time, I believe that this generation, anybody living in this generation will break into the Senate, and God willing, we'll find that space at the White House. So being that breakthrough generation, we just need as many voices as possible to show that we actually have understanding and we can represent the nation and the world.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for sharing that. And, you know, I started the training talking about the importance of relationship and how bringing our whole selves into it is so important. It's both vulnerable, but also, I think, a sign of strength. And so I very much appreciate you being so personal and sharing some stories there about what brought you to this work and where you are today. So if you have time, I'd love to open up the floor to others on the call to ask questions, if that is okay in our remaining few minutes here.
Yes, I have time.
Great. So for others, if you have questions, please raise your hand or unmute.
It seems like our audience is very timid today. But I want to once again invite folks to share, or because the Congresswoman, I know her time is very limited, and we are grateful for you for joining, for your powerful testimony and sharing. Really, the way for us to advocate is multi-pronged. When we have a personal relation with the issue, it is personal. We put our everything in it, and we are grateful for our allies for supporting and really looking into how we are moving forward. So please, while you have her here, we might not have the ability to be with her anytime soon. If you have anything to share with her. Professor Pierre, yes, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. As a fellow Haitian American Howard alum, I am so proud of you. That's the first thing that I want to say. The question that I have is, your trajectory is it's very unusual and inspiring at the same time. And I'm curious, what pieces of legislation are you most passionate about getting through as a Congresswoman?
You know, healthcare equity is 100% on the table. especially when we're looking at mental health. Healthcare equity also comes in. We have to consider cultural competency, because a lot of the time when we look at minorities of low income, the proper healthcare professional isn't provided to give the services, and so people are kind of left out. So healthcare definitely, but that's a timing issue when we can put enough pressure for healthcare. But also what's really imperative is how the US interacts with Haiti, Latin America, and the Western Hemisphere. We have an opportunity for the first time to really dictate that. And it's exciting and frustrating in the same moment for myself. I say that because today I was on the phone with different leaders and organizations and the Haitian elected officials. And I said, my God, we are still the only community who cannot lead ourselves or have obstacles in front of ourselves, even the United States. You know, they tell you first, well, you know, you need to go to college, get the highest degree, you get the highest degree. Then you need to have elected officials, you get elected officials. Then you get into Congress, and people are still slow rolling and still not understanding the urgency of what's going on in Haiti. And to me, I feel like that's just completely unacceptable. The same way I can articulate what's important, what's going on in other nations, and you can see that, be it in Iran and other areas, you need to be able to see it right here also. And when you have a consensus amongst the diaspora and everybody coming together, we need to be responding. So, how we need to rethink and make sure that we are now changing how we do foreign policy when it comes to Haiti and Latin America and the Caribbean. And it's funny that you said you went to Howard, because you know Howard people, how we love to stick together. But originally I wanted to be an international lawyer and become a judge. And the final paper I wrote was to graduate. It talked about the awful stench of racism in foreign affairs. And here we are, 23 years later, and we're still smelling this awful stench of racism when it comes to foreign affairs and when it comes to foreign policy in Black nations. So that is something that is definitely a mission of mine, to make sure that equity permeates in every area: economics, foreign affairs, healthcare. That is our duty before we pass this earth, is to make sure that we left our mark. And I always reinforce to everyone that this truly is our destiny moment, and everyone has a responsibility in how we make this moment great. And we all have to lean into that, what we could bring into that to make it great. And that is our stories, our testimony, our resilience, and our determination. And we will complete what God put us here to do.
Amen to that, Alan. We are seeing questions on the chat if you want to go ahead, or Professor
Jozef
Pierre,
also has
maybe Professor Pierre can read the questions for us, Alan.
Yeah, and Jozef also has his hand up, so I was going to turn to him and then to the chat. That works, Guerline. Thanks.
No, I just want to thank the Congresswoman for Sheila for this speech. And one of the things you mentioned is that what's missing is a voice. I think that's a very critical thing, and especially at that moment where we feel like there are so many issues about Haiti, but we feel like the voices of Haitians or people of Asian background are not being heard. So I want to thank you a lot for being that great voice, and I want to take the opportunity because I work with Partners in Health, Zami La Santé. And we have a big event in Miami, October 22nd, 23rd. And it's about how Asian leadership has played a pivotal role in the global fight for global health equity in this organization. So we, as the kind of voice you are, and we have some important Asian influencers like Edwidge Zantika or probably Jimmy Jean-Louis and others that will join. If you have, I know you're extremely busy, but we would really happy to have your voice at that event if that's possible.
Please send me the information to my office. I think I have someone on here, and we will definitely try and squeeze that in.
That would be great. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
So I'll read the questions out.
Okay.
And so I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Natalie Frederick Pierre. I am an assistant professor of history at Howard University, and I'm the on-site committee chairwoman for the 34th Annual Haitian Studies Association Conference. So Congresswoman, we have a few questions in the chat for you. The first is, what advocacy support can Haitian Americans bring to lawmakers such as yourself?
I think the biggest thing is being able to articulate and amplify what's going on. And what I mean by that is, I can give you an example of what we did today. The Haitian elected officials came together. We've been trying to amplify this issue, amplifying the need for sanctions. And when we would call the radio, TV, they said, well, we have a hurricane or the election. But because the Haitian elected officials rallied and had a press conference, and we also had constituents who were calling their members and calling the administration, sending letters, all of a sudden everyone started paying attention today, and we got a whole bunch of movement. So anyone who wants to be an advocate, lobbying and bringing these issues to your elected officials is one of the biggest ways, especially when we have toolkits, because we put together toolkits. I know Haitian Bridges puts together toolkits in which we say, let's amplify this together and start working as a collective community. Those meetings are imperative. Even working closely with our office. A lot of the time, issues pop up, depending on what's going on. If the house is burning in Congress, we can immediately. So reaching out to us and saying, hey, this is going on, we would like this policy, we have this bill, working with us on that level is imperative. Because like I said, you guys will feel it before we do it in Congress. You will understand it before we do, especially having a group of intellectuals there to talk about this, what needs to be done, because it's been done is imperative.
Thank you. Another question from the chat from Lois Wilkin. I've been a cultural activist presenting grassroots Haitian artists in New York. How can I shift that work into advocacy?
Well, the great thing about artists tell the story of the and what the personal story is. And each artist has a perspective. I always tell people that the Haitian story is a great story that's never been told from the perspective of where we are today. We've never had a conversation or story telling us about what Haitian people are suffering in Haiti, the diaspora, and how we've overcome to be one of the strongest political forces in the United States. So I think her using that storytelling ability through her art and really talking about what we're suffering in artists would be a great piece, because in each art, each articulation of what you're going through is a humanitarian perspective that I think people can connect and help us drive policy based on that.
Okay, okay, we have another question, and this is a big one. Thank you from Patrick Springer. Thank you, Congresswoman, for your time. My question is, what would you like at large in the US, Canada, France, Chile, etc., to understand about Haiti and what Haiti needs?
Wow, that's a big question. I think that the biggest thing that we have to understand is that Haiti needs support. And we talk a lot about a Haitian-led solution from the Haitian people. But if we understand how Haiti has been pillaged, how Haiti has been denied many different things that other nations have, and understand that there is no infrastructure really in Haiti for us to determine, or for Haitians to determine their future, then we realize about what kind of assistance is necessary. And that is to support the initiatives. That is to support even education in Haiti. Right now, we got testimony that kids haven't been in school now for weeks. They haven't been in school. So supporting the education with this generation, and also having classes and supporting civility and programs. And I brought that up because being a member, I have a lot of different groups who come to my office, and the groups will have students and older adults who are advocating, and they will propose to me legislation that they worked on all year. We could do the same thing in Haiti. We could have a group of kids come into the United States, go to members. If you're under 18, I can even bring you on the floor and start educating them to the process, normalizing that they can lead through intelligence and not intimidation, that they can lead with their intellect and also convince people through diplomatic ways. And this is what a democracy looks like. And I think being on the congressional floor is something that will make it real for you, because on the congressional floor, you will hear people get angry. I remember when I was proceeding, and it was my first presiding, it was my first time. And I came on the subway, and I was on the train with one of my colleagues. He was a Republican. And we were talking like, hey, how are you? It was very pleasant, excellent. Then I got up there to preside, and I had the gavel. And he said, I want to start off by thanking all of the Border Patrol who kept all the Haitians out of the country who were coming in to bring drugs and do crime. So I wanted to pick it up saying that. But, could you imagine at that moment, I had to just look like, and then I had to look, I said, they're like, I calmed myself. And then afterwards I spoke to him. But that's our democracy, right? Our democracy is to be able afterwards. And I said to him, did you think that of me? Because my parents are immigrants. Did you think that we came here to bring in drugs and to do crime? Because if you don't think that of me, how can you stand there and have it in the congressional record recorded that this is what Haitian people were coming to do? And so we have to challenge each other and be diplomatic about it and have those conversations. And I think that's what people need to see, not the theater that happens on TV where people are yelling, but in real life, that conversation. And I would love to support that kind of program because we would bring up new leaders and we would strengthen present leaders.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. That we are at about time, but I wanted to open up the floor to our speakers if there were any final remarks you wanted to make before we close out for this afternoon.
Well, I'll just make a final remark. I want to thank you again for having me here today. This is just such a great opportunity for us to come together and really put our heads together on how we can move the Haitian cause further. And, it's a hard part for us now because we're breaking through. And anytime when you're breaking through, it's always new, it's always difficult. People just aren't used to hearing Haitian people advocating for themselves and to do it in this direction. But with the collective of everybody who's here with diverse backgrounds, we're building a coalition in which we're making sure that happens in this time. And so I thank you guys so much for what you're doing, your advocacy and building new leaders and helping us get a path forward for everyone to actually be able to have equitable policies in their countries. And before I go, I want to say a great thank you to Guerline. Thank you for looking out in that hearing. Guerline, you are a rock star, and everything that you do, your determination, I can't say enough on how much we need you and need more people like you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And if there's any time you want to come back home to Howard University, please let me know.
Listen, my son is at Howard right now. He is a freshman. So yes, I'll be coming back. I helicopter all the time over there. And my husband went to Howard. So we're huge Howard. And I will be back and, make sure we meet up.
Absolutely. Ms. Jozef, Mr. Yarborough, any final remarks before we close out?
Just gratitude. Thank you all for being here, for your questions. Thank you to Guerline and the Congresswoman as well for your contributions, and just really appreciate having this platform from the Haitian Studies Association. And I hope that I know this is the pre-conference time. So I hope that folks who are traveling to come into DC for this will have safe travels and a wonderful time together this weekend.
Well, thank you so much. I apologize for the curtain that looks like a shower curtain. I looked behind, I said, wait a minute, that looks weird. But thank you so much for having me, Alan, HSA. I'm looking forward to be sharing space with you over the weekend. Thank you to everyone who are here. I'm seeing people coming directly from Haiti. I see Jessica. I see people really working on the ground. Alan, thank you for bringing us all together here. Claudine, merci en pile, chérie. On se voit demain. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I am here to serve whatever is needed. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Sheila Cherfilus-McCormick. Grateful for you all. Merci en pile.
All right, everyone. Happy conference season. Bye.